The November rain fell like needles against Elena Rossi's skin. She stood at the edge of the crosswalk, one hand gripping her broken umbrella, the other pressed instinctively against the swell beneath her threadbare coat. The walk signal blinked its impatient countdown. 12 seconds. 11. 10. She should move. She knew she should move. But her legs had turned to marble the moment the black SUV screeched to a halt in the middle of the intersection, at a green light. The rear door opened, and Lorenzo Moretti stepped into the rain. He was exactly as she remembered. Sharp charcoal suit, tailored to his broad shoulders like armor. Dark hair slicked back from a face that belonged on Roman coins, cruel and beautiful in equal measure. He moved with that predatory stillness she used to watch from across ballrooms, the kind of grace that made other men step aside without knowing why. But then his eyes found her coat, found the curve she could no longer hide, and the dark king of New York City went pale as death. Time didn't slow. It shattered. Elena watched the color drain from his olive skin, watched his jaw turn to iron, and watched his black eyes drop to her belly and stay there, unblinking, unbreathing. Rain streamed down his face. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't move at all. 6 months. 6 months of silence. 6 months of hiding. 6 months of pretending she could outrun the shadow of a man who owned half the city. And now, standing in a freezing November downpour with her heart slamming against her ribs, Elena understood the truth she had been running from. You don't escape Lorenzo Moretti. You only delay the reckoning. His lips moved. A single word swallowed by the rain, but she read it on his mouth like a curse. Elena. The crosswalk signal turned red, and she ran. 6 months ago, Elena Rossi signed her divorce papers with trembling hands. She remembered the weight of the pen. The way the ink bled into the paper was like a wound. Lorenzo had sat across from her in his mahogany-paneled study, his face carved from granite, his silence more suffocating than any words he could have spoken. Sign it, his lawyer had said, and you walk away clean. No assets. No alimony. No contact. She had looked at Lorenzo then, really looked at him, searching for some flicker of the man she had married 3 years before. The man who had promised her the world and delivered a gilded cage instead. But his eyes were empty. Black holes where a heart should be. So she signed. And she walked. Now, Elena lived in a studio apartment above a Korean grocery store in Queens. The radiator clanked like a dying animal. The windows leaked cold air through cracks she'd stuffed with newspaper. Her mattress sat on the floor because she couldn't afford a bed frame. But it was hers. Every morning she woke up alone, and that aloneness felt like oxygen after 3 years of drowning. She had found work as a freelance translator, hunched over her laptop until her spine ached, converting Italian legal documents into English for $12 a page. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But she had learned to stretch $1 until it screamed, learned to survive on rice and canned vegetables, learned to ignore the gnawing worry that kept her awake at 3 a.m. The pregnancy had been a shock. She discovered it 2 weeks after the divorce, a faint pink line on a dollar store test, her hand shaking so badly she dropped it in the sink. For 3 days, she didn't leave her apartment. She sat on her mattress, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to comprehend how a single act of farewell, one last desperate night in Lorenzo's bed before she signed the papers, had left her carrying his children. Children. Plural. The ultrasound at the free clinic had revealed 2 heartbeats. Twins. Girls. Elena had stared at the grainy black and white image, at those 2 tiny flickering pulses, and made a decision that would either save her or destroy her. Lorenzo would never know. She couldn't go back to that life. The guards who followed her everywhere. The whispered conversations stopped when she entered a room. the blood she pretended not to see on Lorenzo's cuffs when he came home late at night. She couldn't raise her daughters in a marble fortress built on bones. So she hid, changed her phone number, avoided the neighborhoods where Moretti's eyes might recognize her, let the weeks bleed into months until she almost believed she had gotten away with it. But secrets, Elena was learning, have a way of growing too big to conceal. Her belly was 5 months old now. Her oversized coats were running out of room. And today, standing at that rain-slicked crosswalk, the illusion of safety had shattered like glass under a boot heel. He had seen her. He had seen them. And she knew with the certainty of a woman who had once been loved like a possession, that Lorenzo Moretti would not stop until he had what belonged to him. Elena made it 3 blocks before the SUV found her again. She was panting, one hand braced against a brick wall, rain plastering her hair to her face. Her lungs burned. Her legs shook. Running while 5 months pregnant was not something her body was designed for, and the ache in her lower back warned her she was pushing too far. The black vehicle glided to a stop beside her. Silent. Patient. The rear window rolled down. "Get in the car, Elena." His voice was exactly as she remembered. Velvet wrapped around steel, the kind of voice that made men confess and women forget their own names. She closed her eyes, gripping the rough brick until her knuckles went white. "I have nothing to say to you." "Then don't speak. Just listen." "Go to hell, Lorenzo." A pause. Then the door opened, and she heard the splash of his expensive shoes hitting the wet pavement. "You're soaked. You're shivering. And you're carrying," his voice cracked. Actually cracked. "You're carrying my child, and you're standing in a downpour arguing with me. Get in the car before you catch pneumonia." She turned to face him. He looked different. Still beautiful, still terrifying, but there was something fractured in his expression that she had never seen before. His eyes kept dropping to her belly, like he couldn't help himself, like the sight of it was a wound he couldn't stop pressing. "Your child," she repeated flatly. "So that's what this is about. The heir. The bloodline. The precious Moretti legacy." "Elena." "I'm not a broodmare, Lorenzo. I'm not a possession. And I am done being your prisoner." She forced herself to stand straight, to meet his gaze without flinching. "I signed those papers. I walked away. You have no claim to me anymore." His jaw tightened. "You walked away carrying my children. That changes things. Children. Plural." Elena's blood turned to ice. She hadn't told him. She hadn't told anyone. The only people who knew about the twins were the nurses at the free clinic. But the way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, told her everything she needed to know. "You've been watching me." It wasn't a question. Lorenzo's silence was its own answer. "You've been watching me this whole time." Her voice rose, cracking with fury and betrayal. "The divorce was a lie. Was my freedom a lie? Every day I thought I was finally free. You had eyes on me. I had to know you were safe. I don't belong to you anymore." He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood and smoke, the scent that used to cling to her pillow, the scent she had spent 6 months trying to forget. "You belong to yourself," he said quietly. "I know that now. But those babies, they're half mine. And I will not let them grow up in a drafty apartment above a grocery store, with a mother who skips meals because she can't afford food." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you?" "I know everything, Tesoro." His voice was soft. "Dangerous. I know you work 16-hour days. I know you haven't bought yourself a new piece of clothing since August. I know you cried for an hour after your last ultrasound." Her hand flew to her mouth. I'm not here to cage you again, Lorenzo continued. I'm here because you're carrying twins in a high-risk pregnancy, and you're too proud to ask for help. He reached out, his fingers hovering an inch from her cheek, not quite touching. Come with me. Let me take care of you. And when the babies are born, if you still want to leave, I won't stop you. Elena stared at him, searched his eyes for the lie, for the trap, but all she saw was something she had never seen in 3 years of marriage. Fear. Lorenzo Moretti, the Dark King who had never flinched at bloodshed or betrayal, was afraid. Why? She whispered. Why do you even care? His hand dropped to his side. His voice, when he answered, was barely audible over the rain. Because I lost you once due to my own blindness. I won't lose them too. The townhouse was in Brooklyn Heights, a narrow brownstone on a tree-lined street that looked nothing like the fortress she had escaped. Elena sat in Lorenzo's private doctor's office on the second floor, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching a gray-haired physician named Dr. Marchetti run an ultrasound wand over her belly. 2 heartbeats filled the room. Strong, steady, unmistakably alive. Twins, Dr. Marchetti confirmed, as if Elena didn't already know. Both girls. Both healthy, though I'm concerned about your blood pressure, Mrs. Moret. Ms. Rossi, Elena corrected sharply. The doctor glanced at Lorenzo, who stood rigid by the window, his face unreadable. Ms. Rossi, Dr. Marchetti amended carefully. Your blood pressure is elevated. Given your stress levels and nutritional deficiencies, I'd recommend bed rest and close monitoring. Have you experienced headaches? Blurred vision. Elena hesitated. She had. 4 weeks. But admitting that felt like handing Lorenzo another weapon. Occasionally, she said. Dr. Marchetti frowned. Preeclampsia is a serious risk with twin pregnancies. If left untreated. I understand. Do you? Lorenzo's voice cut across the room. He hadn't moved from the window, but his eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Do you understand that you could die, Elena? That our daughters could die? Don't lecture me about risk, she shot back. I lived in your world for 3 years. I know what death looks like. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dr. Marchetti quietly excused herself, leaving them alone with the monitor still displaying those 2 flickering heartbeats. Lorenzo walked slowly toward the examination table. He stopped an arm's length away, his gaze fixed on the screen. Isabella, he murmured. And Lucia. Elena blinked. What? Those were my grandmother's names. My mother's mother and her sister. He reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of the monitor. I thought, if you approved. Something cracked in Elena's chest. In 3 years of marriage, Lorenzo had never talked about his family, never mentioned his childhood, his parents, or his past. He had been a closed vault, beautiful and impenetrable, and she had eventually stopped trying to pick the lock. Now he stood before her, offering pieces of himself like shards of broken glass. Why are you doing this? She asked. The real reason. Not the air talk, not the legacy. Why do you actually care? Lorenzo's jaw worked. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I failed you. The words hung in the air. I told myself I was protecting you, he continued, his voice rough. Every guard I assigned. Every door I locked. Every choice I made for you without asking. I told myself it was love. He finally met her eyes and she saw the fractures in him, the cracks he had spent a lifetime hiding. But it wasn't love, Elena. It was control. And I was so afraid of losing you that I crushed you instead. Elena's throat tightened. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years, and you never once said, I didn't know how. His laugh was bitter and broken. I was raised to command, not to feel. My father taught me that vulnerability was death, that love was weakness. He shook his head. I didn't realize I had become him until you walked out that door. The monitor beeped softly between them. 2 heartbeats, steady and sure. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Lorenzo said. I'm not asking you to love me again. I'm just asking for a chance to be different. For them. He gestured toward the screen. For Isabella and Lucia. Elena looked at the man who had once been her captor. Her husband. Her greatest mistake. And she saw, for the first time, the possibility of something else. Brooklyn Heights, she said finally. I stay in the townhouse. I have my own room, my own space. You don't make decisions for me. And when the babies are born, we renegotiate. Done. And Lorenzo. She held his gaze unflinching. If you ever lock a door on me again, I will burn this whole empire to the ground. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. I would expect nothing less. The townhouse was not what Elena expected. She had braced herself for marble floors and gilded ceilings, for the cold opulence of the Manhattan penthouse she had fled. Instead, she found warm hardwood, exposed brick walls, and windows that flooded every room with natural light. Her bedroom was on the 3rd floor, a spacious corner suite with a 4-poster bed and a clawfoot bathtub in the attached bathroom. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. A stack of pregnancy books rested on the dresser, spines uncracked but clearly chosen with care. The staff will attend to anything you need, Lorenzo had said the first night, standing awkwardly in her doorway like a stranger in his own home. Meals, errands, medical appointments. You won't have to lift a finger. I don't need servants. Humor me. Elena had expected armed guards with cold eyes and earpieces. Instead, she met Rosa, a stout Italian grandmother who ran the kitchen with an iron fist and immediately declared Elena too skinny. There was Marcus, a former Marine who now served as head of security and who treated Elena with quiet, unwavering respect. And there was Gia, a young nurse hired specifically to monitor the pregnancy, who brought Elena herbal tea every morning and didn't ask questions about her past. They were kind. It unsettled her. You're waiting for the cage to close, Lorenzo observed one evening. They were sitting in the library, Elena curled in an armchair with a novel, Lorenzo pretending to read financial reports. The fire crackled between them. Can you blame me? No. He set down his papers. But I meant what I said. You're not a prisoner here. The doors aren't locked. The guards are for protection, not surveillance. He paused. I know trust isn't rebuilt with words. So I'm going to prove it with time. Days turned into weeks. Elena began to let herself breathe. She ate Rose's home-cooked meals until the hollows in her cheeks filled out. She took walks in the small garden behind the townhouse, bundled in a cashmere coat that had mysteriously appeared in her closet. She read, rested, and slowly, reluctantly, let herself be cared for. And she watched Lorenzo. He was different here. Softer. He came home at reasonable hours, ate dinner with her when she allowed it, and never pressed for more than she offered. Some nights she caught him standing in the hallway outside her room, his hand raised as if to knock, then walking away without a word. He was trying. It terrified her how much she wanted to believe him. One night, she found him in the nursery. The room had been empty when she moved in, just bare walls and drop cloths. Now it was transformed. 2 cribs sat side by side, carved from dark walnut. A rocking chair occupied the corner, and Lorenzo stood in the middle of it all, assembling a mobile of silver stars with hands that were far steadier than hers had ever been. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. I couldn't sleep, he said almost sheepishly. Elena walked into the room. She touched the edge of one crib, felt the smooth grain of the wood beneath her fingertips. You did this yourself? Seemed wrong to have someone else build it. This is for my daughters. He set down his tools. I want them to know, someday, that their father isn't just a man who writes checks and issues orders. That he can make things too. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the crosswalk. And she saw a man who was desperately trying to become someone new. At 28 weeks, Elena's blood pressure spiked. She woke in the middle of the night, head pounding, vision blurred at the edges. By the time Gia took her vitals, Lorenzo was already in the room, his face pale as he watched the numbers climb. We're going to the hospital, he said. It wasn't a question. For once, Elena didn't argue. The next 72 hours were a blur of 4 lines, beeping monitors, and doctors speaking in grave, measured tones. Preeclampsia. Severe. The babies were stable for now, but Elena's body was fighting against itself, and every hour felt borrowed. Lorenzo didn't leave her side. He slept in the chair beside her bed, or tried to. Mostly, he sat awake, watching the monitors, as if he could keep her alive through sheer force of will. You should go home, Elena murmured on the second night. You have an empire to run. The empire can wait. Lorenzo. I almost lost you once because I was too busy being the Dark King to notice you were drowning. His voice was raw. I'm not making that mistake again. She studied his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked older than his 34 years. Worn down. Human. I was so afraid of you, she admitted quietly. For 3 years I was afraid of you. He closed his eyes. I know. Not because of what you did. Because of what you could do. The power you had over everything. My home, my freedom, my future. I never knew which version of you I would wake up next to. And now. Elena hesitated. Now. I don't know what I feel. But fear isn't part of it anymore. His hand found hers on the hospital blanket. Gentle. Tentative. I'll take that, he said. For now, I'll take that. When the doctors finally cleared her to return to the townhouse, on strict bed rest with daily monitoring, something had shifted between them. The walls hadn't crumbled, but there were cracks now. Places where light could get through. And for the first time in 6 months, Elena allowed herself to hope. The peace lasted 3 weeks. Elena was in the garden, watching the December snow dust the bare rose bushes, when Lorenzo found her. His expression made her stomach drop. What happened? The Castellanos. He said the name like a curse. They know about the pregnancy. About you being here. Elena's blood turned to ice. The Castellanos were the Moretti family's oldest rivals. Vicious, patient, and utterly ruthless. She had heard the name whispered during her marriage, always followed by silence and dark looks. How? It doesn't matter how. What matters is that you and the babies are now targets. His jaw was granite. They see this pregnancy as leverage. A way to destabilize me. To destabilize everything. Elena sank onto the garden bench, her hands instinctively cradling her belly. What do? We increase security. We limit your movements. And... He hesitated, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or shame. There's something I need to tell you. What? The surveillance. After you left. I told myself I would stop, that I would respect your choice, but... He exhaled harshly. I never stopped watching, Elena. Every day for 6 months, I had eyes on you. I knew where you worked, where you shopped, and where you walked. I knew about the pregnancy before that day at the crosswalk. The words hit her like a physical blow. You knew. I was trying to give you space. Trying to prove to myself that I could let you go. His laugh was bitter. I failed. I saw you struggling, saw you alone and exhausted, and it took every ounce of control not to drag you back. The crosswalk. That was the moment I broke. Elena stared at him. 6 months of believing she was free, and she had never been free at all. Why are you telling me this now? Because the Castellanos will use every secret as a weapon, and I won't let them blindside you with information I should have given you myself. He met her gaze, unflinching. I'm done hiding things from you, Elena. Even the things that make you hate me. She should have been furious. Part of her was furious. But another part, a part she didn't fully understand, recognized the courage it took to confess. If we survive this, she said slowly, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about boundaries. I look forward to it. The proposal came at 2 a.m. Elena couldn't sleep. The babies were restless, kicking against her ribs, and her mind kept circling the same dark thoughts. She had wandered down to the kitchen for warm milk when she found Lorenzo sitting at the island, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. You're awake, he said. So are you. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. There's a way to protect you, Lorenzo said finally. Legally. Within the syndicate's laws. I'm listening. If we remarry, you and the twins gain immunity under the old agreements. No family can touch you without declaring open war. It would make attacking you political suicide. Elena set down her glass. You want to marry me again. As a strategy. I want to keep you alive. His eyes met hers. The ceremony would be real, binding in every way that matters to the syndicate. But the terms would be yours. Separate rooms. No obligations. A partnership, not a prison. She should say no. Every rational instinct screamed that this was a trap, a return to the cage she had escaped. But her hands were pressed against her belly, where Isabella and Lucia were growing, and she knew there was no price too high for their safety. If I do this, she said, I need one thing from you. Name it. Honesty. Complete, unflinching honesty. No more surveillance without my knowledge. No more decisions made for me in the shadows. She held his gaze. If we're going to be partners, I need to be treated like one. Lorenzo extended his hand across the island. Deal. Elena took it. The ceremony happened at midnight, in the townhouse library, with only Rosa and Marcus as witnesses. There were no flowers, no music, and no white dress. Just Elena in a wool sweater and maternity jeans and Lorenzo in a black suit that made him look like the king he was. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Lorenzo leaned in and pressed a single kiss to her forehead. Thank you, he murmured, for trusting me again. Elena didn't say anything, but she didn't pull away. The attack came on a January night, when the snow was falling heavily and the city had gone quiet. Elena was in the nursery, folding tiny onesies she had ordered online, when the first gunshot shattered the window. She hit the floor on instinct, glass raining down around her, and covered her belly with both arms. Somewhere below, she heard shouting, the thunder of boots, and the unmistakable crack of weapons fire. Elena! Lorenzo's voice, somewhere in the chaos. Then he was there, bursting through the door, a gun in his hand and blood already staining his shirt. We have to move. Now. He pulled her to her feet, shielding her with his body as they ran down the back staircase. The townhouse was a war zone. Marcus and his team were holding the front entrance, but she could hear more attackers coming through the garden. The basement, Lorenzo ordered. There's a passage. The bullet hit him before he could finish. Elena screamed as he staggered, his hand flying to his side. Blood poured between his fingers, dark and viscous. "Go," he rasped. "Elena, go. I'm not leaving you." She caught him as he stumbled, dragging his arm over her shoulders. He was heavy, so heavy, but terror gave her strength she didn't know she had. They made it to the basement door, down the concrete steps, and into the hidden passage that led to a safe room beneath the street. The door sealed behind them. Lorenzo collapsed against the wall, his breathing shallow, his face gray. "Pressure," he managed. "On the wound. Don't let me." "Shut up." Elena tore off her cardigan and pressed it against his side. Blood soaked through immediately. "You are not dying on me, Lorenzo Moretti. Not after everything." He laughed weakly. "Bossy. I learned from the best." The next hours were a nightmare. She kept pressure on the wound while his men fought above them, radioing Marcus with shaking hands, praying to every god she had ever heard of. Lorenzo faded in and out of consciousness, his hand occasionally finding hers, squeezing with what little strength he had left. When the all-clear finally came, Elena was soaked in his blood and her own tears. But he was alive. And so were their daughters. Isabella and Lucia Moretti were born on February 14th, in a private hospital suite with Lorenzo holding Elena's hand. The delivery was complicated. 32 weeks, a C-section, and 2 terrifying minutes when Lucia wouldn't breathe. But the doctors were skilled, and the Moretti money bought the best care in the city, and when Elena finally held her daughters in her arms, all the pain melted away. They were perfect. Tiny, red-faced, impossibly fragile, but perfect. Lorenzo stood at the bedside, his arm still in a sling from the shooting, his eyes wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "Isabella," he whispered, touching the downy head of the firstborn. "And Lucia." He looked at Elena, and she saw something in his face she had never seen before. Wonder. Pure, uncomplicated wonder. "You did this," he said. "You gave me this." "We did this," Elena corrected. She was exhausted, sore, and still processing everything that had happened. But in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Whole. "I have a confession," Lorenzo said softly. "Another one?" He smiled. "I love you. I've loved you since the day we met, but I didn't know how to say it without destroying it. I don't expect you to feel the same. I just wanted you to know." Elena looked at him. This man who had been her captor, her husband, her enemy, and her partner. This man who had taken a bullet for her, who had built cribs with his own hands, who had learned to bow when he had only ever known how to command. "I don't know what I feel yet," she admitted. "But I'm willing to find out." Lorenzo leaned down and kissed her. Soft, gentle, asking permission with every brush of his lips. "That's enough," he murmured. "That's more than enough." Outside, the February snow was falling. Inside, 2 newborn girls slept in their bassinets, watched over by a mother who had learned to stand on her own and a father who had learned to kneel. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was theirs. The end. Do you think Lorenzo deserved a second chance, or should Elena have kept running? Let us know in the comments. Love dark mafia tropes and secret pregnancies? Subscribe for your daily dose of high-stakes romance. If this story gets 5,000 likes, we'll release a special bonus chapter from Lorenzo's perspective during those 6 months apart.